faster warming than the global average. It already suffers from water scarcity, a challenge that is expected to grow with climate change, particularly as glaciers melt at an increasing rate. And the region is also home to resource-intensive economies, both in terms of water and energy use, which creates development and security challenges. But it also provides opportunities to contribute to climate solutions. So knowledge is central to the World Bank's ability to influence the global development agenda. Combining global and country data and knowledge, our research programs both use and generate scientific, policy-relevant data to produce wide-ranging insights for solving development challenges in our client countries. And this applies to the climate agenda as well. Climate change is a key consideration in the pursuits of our mission to end extreme poverty and boost prosperity on a livable planet. And this means that climate change informs all of our development support and that we take climate change into account in every project we help formulate with our clients. And we could not do this without the knowledge generated by the scientific community. And to this, we add our own research as well. So we use this collective wealth of knowledge to generate actionable data and evidence-driven policy investment approaches in support of our clients' development agendas. So our use of knowledge in the climate space is driven by our desire to support sound and sustainable development approaches. And this is underscored by our corporate commitment on climate change. And these commitments include production of country climate and development reports, or CCDRs, as you might have heard, which we produce for every country in which we work. And these reports describe the interplay between national development, climate change, and climate policies. They're based on data, rigorous research, and a good understanding of each individual country's context and goals. And they inform policymakers and civil society about the highest priority climate policies. So underlying these analyses are two sets of inputs. First, the latest historical climate and modeled future climate results produced by the scientific community to make this data more accessible and usable to our country teams and the broader public. We've invested heavily in a publicly accessible climate change knowledge portal. This portal provides refined and curated global data on historical and future climate conditions, vulnerabilities, and impacts. Second, we use sector and economy scale modeling to understand the implications of climate change in sectors such as agriculture, water, land, energy, transport, health, and so on, to compare different pathways toward a net zero emissions future. And we integrate this sector level analyses into our macroeconomic models to analyze how countries' development pathways is affected by climate change, and also to produce realistic options for financing the climate and development agendas. So let me give you a couple of examples. In Uzbekistan, using detailed climate and macroeconomic modeling, we found that without action, climate change will lead to greater economic volatility, lower average growth, with an economy 10% smaller by 2050 than it would be without climate damages or climate impacts. But climate risks in Uzbekistan are also deeply intertwined with water security, food security, land degradation. So with irrigated agriculture accounting for 90% of water use, crop and food production systems are highly water intensive with an increasing water stressed environment. So with rising temperatures, reduced precipitation, and retreating glaciers, Uzbekistan is projected to be among the most water stressed countries in the world. So we use our findings to identify and quantify policy responses. For example, our research in our CCDR suggests that the integrated landscape management approaches and climate smart technologies in areas of Uzbekistan with highest adaptation potential are expected to boost crop values by about $4.6 billion US and production on natural pastures by $100 million US over 10 years. So therefore, such approaches will just be crucial for sustainable growth. In fact, throughout our research, we find that climate adaptation measures generate substantial economic and other development benefits in Uzbekistan, making them worthwhile investments even without consideration of climate risks. The benefits of some adaptation investments are indeed 2 to 3 times higher than the costs. However, I would like to emphasize that not all adaptation investments automatically generate positive returns, especially as the benefits depend on the materialization of hazards, which itself is highly subject to uncertainty. So consequently, adaptation strategies must be carefully planned and adaptation projects rigorously evaluated before scarce resources are invested in them. Policymakers cannot do this without comprehensive and detailed scientific knowledge to identify future climate risks accurately and quantify the hazards they entail. Also, in Uzbekistan, we've analyzed different pathways to reach its 2060 net zero emissions goal. So we found, for example, that energy decarbonization, of course, increases energy security and brings over $100 billion in co-benefits as well as innovation opportunities. And this is work that we are continuing with the Uzbekistan Ministry of Finance and Economy as part of our support for the elaboration of their long-term low emissions development strategy. So now let me pivot to Kazakhstan. Projections from climate models there suggest that in the coming decades, climate warming will accelerate glacial melting and increase water availability in the east and south, while driving more arid conditions in the west. So water scarcity will be a particular challenge for Kazakhstan's agricultural sector and vulnerable rural communities. So climate smart agricultural practices such as modern greenhouses and more sustainable livestock practices, as well as measures to renew and modernize aging water supply systems, will be needed as a part of an integrated strategy on adaptation. So in our CCDRs, when we evaluate the impact of climate under different scenarios across several different impact channels, we find that without adaptation, Kazakhstan's economy itself would could shrink by more than 1.5% by 2050, increase poverty by 3%, and decrease real wages by 2.1%. And we also find a different kind of climate risk in Kazakhstan, the risk of not addressing climate change while the rest of the world does. In this case, we find that Kazakhstan's economy could contract in growth between 2 and 2.5% per year. In order to achieve its aspiration of becoming one of the world's top economies by 2050, Kazakhstan needs a growth model that is less dependent on fossil fuels and more focused on investment in new sectors and technologies over time. And reducing greenhouse gas emissions could help Kazakhstan diversify its fossil fuel dependent economy and open up new drivers of economic growth and prosperity for its people. So the World Bank has now developed or produced country climate and development reports for 42 countries or economies across the world. And in these reports, we've identified many adaptation interventions with high economic and social returns. However, even these interventions cannot prevent all of climate change impacts, and more rapid reductions of greenhouse gas emissions is imperative. But fortunately, our research identifies many synergies between greenhouse gas emissions reduction, development, and resilience. For example, the cost savings from high energy efficiency or renewable energy and abated methane emissions to other co-benefits such as better air quality and less congested cities. And we also find that low emissions development can foster similar or even faster economic growth and poverty reductions compared to the current high emissions development pathways. But this all requires supportive enabling environments and macroeconomic and a macroeconomic context, well-designed policies, management of negative social impacts in some sectors, communities, and regions, and stronger financial and technical support from the international community. So to keep informing the right policy choices, the continued production of policy-relevant, high-quality scientific data is key. The World Bank, therefore, supports Central Asian countries through its investments in producing their own data. For example, the Central Asia Water Energy Program and Kyrgyz Republic Air Quality Improvement Project support better data generation and utilization, modeling of climate impacts, and help build capacity for research in the region. In addition, the recently completed Central Asia Hydrometeorology Modernization Project improved the understanding and quantification of disaster and climate risks and enhanced climate and hydrological monitoring and forecasting. So the World Bank is always pleased to support our clients' knowledge agendas so that they can integrate climate change, mitigation, and adaptation into their strategic objectives and priorities, and do this in a way that and I guess we look forward to standing by Central Asia's side and carrying this work forward. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't think I went over time, so appreciate your time and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Gross, and thank you, everybody, for your cooperation. I now call some of our panelists to the stage. Dr. Yuli Dedovitz, please, you can take a seat. Also, Dr. Winston Chow, please. Dr. Kern Verbist, and Zafar Mahmudov, please. And this first panel, and I hope we will have some time for audience interaction, but it is a tight schedule, but we'll do our best, is called Assessing and Addressing Climate Change Impacts in Central Asia, Challenges and Solutions. And our first panelist will be Dr. Winston Chow. He is co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 2. He holds a PhD in geography from Arizona State University, and his main research areas focus on urban climatology, with a particular emphasis on risk and vulnerability. And for the panelists, you may either take the floor here or you can use the microphones in the chair. So up to you.
The panelists has decided in this sense. Okay, so I've got 5 minutes and I'll be wary of the timer there. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you for inviting me here to this pavilion to speak. My name is Winston Chow, as previously mentioned. I'm the current co-chair of the IPCC's Working Group 2 bureau that looks into impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability issues related to climate change. And the focus here is I will be speaking a bit in terms of what has been assessed in the last assessment cycle, in which I was the lead author for the cities, settlements, and key infrastructure chapter, to which I'm also from Singapore and as an Asian, looking into the important impacts, future risks, and also a call for the community, the scientific community, to try and make a difference for AR7. So to begin, Central Asia, just like every other part of the world, is facing a climate crisis in terms of the climate impact drivers, your temperature and your precipitation factors becoming increasingly more frequent and intense in terms of extreme events that leads to noticeable impacts that drives the risk profile of regions and cities in Central Asia. We've noticed mean and extreme temperature increases that have been observed over the past 50 years. We've noticed decreased precipitation and increased evapotranspiration that leads to issues of drought that has strong impacts for the region's agriculture and hydroelectric resources. There's also been an assessment that because of the land use and land cover change combined with these climate impact drivers, dust storms have become more frequent in the region. Noticeably, in the Tian Shan mountainous regions, we've noticed that the glacial ice mass have decreased significantly over time. And also, because I'm an urban person, I've noticed that the major cities in the region, Tashkent, Almaty, Astana, Bishkek, all cities above 1 million people in population, have issues of the heat island. It's become warmer at night and has a strong impacts on human physiology. But also there's that core risk in terms of air pollution. So air quality has decreased there in these major urban areas as well. These are all observed impacts. The concern is that the model projections have shown that these risks, these impacts will be translated to future risks, and that is in the pipeline. So as the world continues to warm beyond 1.52 degrees Celsius, these risks will become more exacerbated over time. The second point that I want to raise here, and very relevant for Central Asia, is that in the previous assessment, we've noticed a trend of increasing compounding and cascading risks that happen. The heat island and air pollution issues in cities is one example of compounding climate risks, but these risks are not just acute in nature. They propagate over time and they propagate beyond the region. It can be transboundary in nature. In other words, they can cascade across space and across time. These have been observed in a lot of human and natural systems within Central Asia. One noticeable point from the human perspective is that of hydrological resources don't just stay within one country. Lots of the rivers cross across Central Asia. They have drought conditions will have immense ramifications on the discharge levels of rivers that will affect your hydrological resources or hydropower resources there. In terms of agriculture, a lot of your wheat, barley, potatoes, cotton plants and crops will be affected from the compounding risks of warmer temperatures and increased droughts that will happen. Food security issues, therefore, are a big problem there. For urban risk, I've already pointed out on the challenges facing both potential increased morbidity and mortality issues from heat stress, as well as air quality issues. So the point is that we can't just look into the risk on just one city or one country alone. They cut across different regions, particularly in Central Asia. The last point, and this is particularly relevant because I understand there's a couple of new journals coming out, and this is important with my role as the co-chair of the 7th assessment report that's coming up. Much more research is needed. If you look at the Asia chapter in AR6, there is a dearth of good scientific research that's published in the peer-reviewed literature that can help with informed policy-relevant assessments for stakeholders in the region. We know there are a lot of solutions are present very quickly. So the lack of studies precludes a very solid assessment. We hope that this can help, further research will take place. It can inform on important discussions, not just within the scientific assessment, but also on future losses and damages that are happening right now in the rooms over there at the negotiating stage. And lastly, there is a special report on cities and climate change that is coming out over the next 3 years. We hope to have a solid contribution of Central Asian scientific research that can help with this assessment over the next 3 years. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this great insight and overview, really, of the climate and human systems and how they cascade and interact with each other. Next, I would like to call on my dear colleague, Dr. Juli Didowitz. He's a researcher and project lead of the Central Asia Project at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. He has professional experience in hydrological modeling and climate change and holds a PhD in geography from the University of Potsdam and National University of Kiev. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. A lot of familiar faces. Yeah, so I'll try to give a short overview what we can expect in terms of climate change and, of course, on water sources. And as you probably know, yeah, how I can use it. Okay. I really like, so the climate change is not something you don't know. We're always talking about the climate change, but I really like this picture on the left-hand side that shows global temperature anomaly. And each stripe, each line indicates 1 year. And if this year is below average, it's blue. And if it's above average, it's red. And you can see that for the last 170 years, recent decades, they were always above average. And even if you look on Central Asian countries, they have the same patterns. So the recent years always above average. It could be Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, or Turkmenistan. It doesn't matter. We have temperature increase for recent decades. Even more, Central Asia is temperature increase in Central Asia is higher than global average. And now I have a question. When I have a water source as so important component for Central Asian economies, and it have impacts in relation with agriculture or energy, it depends from the countries and so on, how it will affect, how climate change will affect these economies, and what we can expect in the future. And to answer that, we can just take a look on future projections in terms of I don't know. Can I? Yeah. Can I go back? Yes. So just let's take a look on projections of temperature and precipitation for the whole Central Asia for 3 different future periods for recent CMIP6 projections. And you can see that temperature rises steadily to the end of the century. And it can reach up to 6 degrees, and especially on the northern part of our region, North Kazakhstan. But if you look at precipitation, you can see that Some regions, mountainous regions, will benefit. So they will not benefit in terms of benefit, but in terms of bigger precipitation, much more precipitation, and also Kazakhstan. But other regions, they have no change. And what does it mean for water sources? So usually, as you know, the water sources are in Central Asia, highly dependent on snow accumulation during the winter. And it means with a higher temperature, our precipitation, even if it's increased, it will convert from snowfall to rain. And it appears that some regions will, this snow accumulation will be lower, and it will be less water for vegetation season. And you can see it on next graphs. So we have snow water equivalent projections, and you can see that it's decreasing by the end of the century for the whole region, and it's even more in the mountainous region, and of course on northern part of Kazakhstan. And how it reflects to river discharge projections, we did some studies with regional hydrological modeling, and here's example of 3 different basins across the Central Asia. So one on the north in Kazakhstan is the Zhabai River. Another one is one of the tributaries of Amudarya in the mountains, is Kafirnigan. And one southern basin is Murgab. It originates in Afghanistan and flows to Turkmenistan. And you can see that almost in all basins, for example, in Kafirnigan and Murgab, we have decreased during the summer. And it's a direct result of decreased snowpack accumulation during the winter. But also it affects the spring flood, and you have an increase in March and April. So it means that the snow will melt earlier, and we have impact, so have an increase. But for example, for Zhabai, we have an increase for almost all seasons, and it's mainly because of increase of precipitation. Yeah, and so in general, what we can say is that we can expect seasonal shift of river discharge, and we have a decrease in summer months. I think my time is over, so thank you very much. And if you have any more questions, I will be glad to talk to you and answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move on to Dr. Cohen Verbist. He is program specialist working at the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. He holds a PhD in drought management and water harvesting from the University of Ghent. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So just contribute a bit further to the discussion that was just started. And I think one slide I really like to contribute here is the contribution of glacier and snowmelt to water availability. And again, here you see that for the region we're talking about, Central Asia, that contribution is quite high compared to other regions in the world. That's also a reason why from our end at UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, I'm just trying to move on with this one. We have a quite clear focus on scientific research innovation regarding the cryosphere, and this is part of our IHP9 strategic plan, which is just started last year, but also looking at the impact of climate change on integrated water resources management, and in this case also looking at monitoring changes in the cryosphere system, such as also mountain lakes. And particularly for Central Asia region, we've been supporting member states on their assessment of snow, glaciers, and water resources. And these are just a few of the publications coming out of the last few years. And several of them are actually focusing on the Central Asian region. Some of them also are for the Andean region. And as a result, we also prepared 2 projects, one funded by the GEF and another one by the Adaptation Fund, each of about $6 million, which is really focusing on 2 different aspects of the cryosphere. The first one is about looking at the climate-sensitive mountain environments, looking at identification of potential adaptation actions also for the limiting water resources coming from glacier melt and snow melt, but also looking at glacial lake outburst floods, which of course are increasing over time. And as one of the researchers also mentioned a few days ago in one of the other sessions, that only about 8 of those lakes are being monitored, while there's hundreds of them actually posing a threat. So there's certainly a need to really step up that work, and this project hopefully also contributes to that work. And then just to finalize, I see still a few minutes left, but anyway, I just want to highlight that there is indeed an International Year of Glacier Preservation 2025 announced last year in the UNGA. And in this sense, I would like all of you to contribute to that year. As UNESCO and WMO, we are tasked to facilitate implementation of the International Year, but also the observance of the World Day for Glaciers, which will be on the 21st of March of every year, starting in 2025. And we also just heard from President Macron a few weeks ago that he would like to announce a decade for glaciers. So likely that will also go through the system and will be announced later this year as part of the UNGA, so that we have really a period of about 10 years starting in 2025 to put the glaciers on the map and raise global awareness on the critical role of glacier snow and ice in the climate system and hydrological cycle. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much on this great time management. I would like to introduce Zafar Mahmoudov. He's Executive Director at the Regional Environmental Center for Central Asia, which is, of course, the lovely pavilion that is also hosting us. So thank you for this. He has professional experience in mainstreaming climate change adaptation and mitigation into national development plans and strategies. So the floor is yours.
Good morning, dear participants. I would like to start commenting on the very interesting words that the previous speaker, the opening, Mr. Markus Hicken, said that Germany is the largest climate change funding country. And true to those words is also the organization of this pavilion. The Pavilion of Central Asian Countries is largely supported by the German government. So this is an opportunity for the Central Asian countries to come together and join their efforts on the negative impacts, on managing or coping negative impacts of the climate change. So I will not go into the details as the previous speakers, doctors said about the negative impacts of the climate change. I would rather speak about two distinct things and 4 points on those, and I will highlight 4 points on those two distinct things. One is the regional dynamics, and the other one is the global interconnection, intercooperation with the Central Asian region. There is a lot of studies going on in Central Asia on the negative impacts of climate change, what can be done, and Regional Environmental Center for Central Asia, CAREC, is also taking part in those studies. Just think a little bit aside from those studies, what could additionally be done to either improve or to provide some strength to these studies so they can be also utilized by other layers like decision-making layer or the students or the development partners. And getting into those 4 points of the regional dynamics. The first one would be the examining the understanding of interconnectedness, the complex interplay between political, economic, social, and environmental factors in the Central Asian region. So there has to be also an examination made between the interaction between these sectors, which we have noticed is still quite weak. The second one is the analysis. We need to do analysis of key trends, emerging trends and their impacts, such as population growth, urbanization, resource scarcity, climate change, and their implications on regional stability. Of course, there are studies made, but then we have to also, these studies have also look at these, into connection between how these trends play, or what kind of role do they play when these trends are put together. The third one, very important one, is interstate and regional cooperation. It will be very important also to assess the current state of relationship between the Central Asian countries. Unfortunately, we have to also speak about this, because all the studies we have speaks about the entire region as just one region, but the decisions or the proposals made in these studies have also should also consider the state of relationship between the countries that happen. Of course, the state of relationship is at the very amicable level, but sometimes some decisions are withheld due to some challenges or some misunderstandings happening temporarily between one and two countries sometimes. So those things have also be considered into those in those studies. And the fourth one, the role of non-state actors. We know that there is a huge capacity, and we have to recognize that capacity, the growing influence of civil society in the civil society organizations in the region. Now, after 20 years, 30 years of independence, so these civil society organizations have grown to be really influential in many ways in Central Asia. They are, also, we have to consider the businesses. They are one of the largest also potential investors in Central Asia in tackling climate change issues. So these are the four things, the four dynamics we have to consider at the regional scale. And moving on to the global scale, the first thing we have to consider is Central Asia's strategic location. We have to recognize its vital role in global trade, in energy security and geopolitical stability. The second one is the engagement with global actors. We have to assess the existing partners' contribution made in the Central Asian region. This really heavily helps the countries with their NDCs, with the implementation of their commitments undertaken by the countries. And because I have run out of the time, I will just speak out the last two more points, which is the advancing regional interests in the global arena. So in advancing the Central Asia's interests in the global arena. And the fourth one is promoting regional peace and security, which we have also experienced as quite a crucial thing to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving us a little insight also on the political and on the economic backgrounds there. Now I welcome online our discussant. I hope the transition works well. This is Dr. Alisher Mirzabayev. He is Senior Scientist for Policy Analysis and Climate Change at the International Rice Research Institute. He has been actively involved as a coordinating lead author and lead author in the IPCC 6 assessment report. Alisher, do we see you online? Do we have you?
I'm online. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes. See you, not yet, but maybe our technicians can take care of this. As long as we hear you, we're good. So please, without further ado, you can start discussing. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. These were very great presentations, highlighting very important points for climate change research and action for Central Asia. So one important conclusion I drew from this discussion is that, which was mentioned right at the beginning, that Central Asia can play a very important role, both for climate change adaptation, but also climate change mitigation. And I know the countries have very ambitious plans how to contribute to climate change mitigation aspects as well. In terms of climate change adaptation, one factor is coming out again and again and again, and this is water. Water scarcity, impacts of climate change and water. It seems the fundamental aspect of adapting to climate change in Central Asia would be through better managing water. And one more thing that I would like to highlight, which were emphasized strongly by Dr. Winston Cho and Mr. Zafar Mahmoudov as well. So compounding and cascading risks. So we know about compounding, cascading climatic risks, but for Central Asia, as it was highlighted, we also need to combine that with socioeconomic factors, even political, geopolitical aspects, which may be interacting with this climate change impacts dimensions in order to have a more comprehensive, more accurate vision of these impacts and how we can deal with them. And then in that regard, as I'm coming more from the research perspective, from the scientific community, I see there are 4 gaps that we need to address in terms of climate change research in Central Asia. One is we have, first of all, there is a lack of studies in general, on research in general in Central Asia, especially if we are comparing with other similar regions across the world. But most of the research is about natural science dimensions. We'll need more research in socio-economic aspects of climate change, impacts, how to adapt to climate change, how to contribute to mitigation. Second is we need strengthen and in some cases build up local climate modeling capacities. So now we are relying on global models to identify what would be to project the impacts of climate change in the region. But there are a lot of very granular things happening inside the region which are not accounted for in these global models. So to have a better, accurate picture of climate change impacts, we need to have a more granular local modeling of these impacts. Number three is a big part of climate change discussion in Central Asia is through agricultural lens. This is understandable and this is important, no question about that. But it's clear that we need to move discussion expanded beyond agriculture, specifically to urban areas. A big part of the region's population is increasingly living in urban areas, and climate change would have very strong impacts on these cities and towns through very different ways. It was mentioned, like heat island effects, pollution, also affecting health and labor productivity, and subsequently affecting economies. So more attention to urban impacts. And my final point would be, we need to increase the participation of our regional scientists in international scientific processes, for example, specifically in IPCC. One of the important ways how this could be done is to contributing to the review process of IPCC reports. There are several stages in the IPCC process where these reports are put up to review. And this is the moment where scientific community from Central Asia can actively participate. So I'm very happy that we have now these very active organizations in the region, like CAREC, Regional Center CAREC, or German Kazakh University, which are actively participating and leading the discussions in the region. I'm sure that in the next cycle of IPCC assessment, we'll have very strong participation from Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your commenting on this. So it's very, very insightful. If there is a question from the audience, I would, for a brief discussion, shortly open the floor. If not, it's also okay to move on as we're just in time right now. I see no urgent questions, so thank you so much. So we'll be moving on now to our next speaker. You may actually, thank you very much for the panel. You may leave the floor. Our next speaker will be Dr. Mark Smith. He is Senior Director of Water Systems and Director General of the International Water Management Institute. He has a professional experience in transboundary cooperation and water management in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. He also holds a PhD in ecology and resource management from the University of Edinburgh. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much. And thank you to the previous panel for such an interesting set of interventions and discussion points. IMI, my institute, the International Water Management Institute, we're very proud to have an office in Tashkent and work in the region of Central Asia. Many great partnerships, fantastic work. I have a great team of colleagues there. And I have a few remarks to share with you that were in part prepared by my colleagues. So anything that I say that is correct and sounds good, that's from my colleagues. Any mistakes that I make, those are mine, okay? I won't repeat. We've heard a very good outline of the impacts of climate change that are happening and that are expected in the region of Central Asia, so I won't repeat those. I would just raise, perhaps in addition to those, to point towards, well, who is vulnerable? Who is vulnerable to those impacts around water, around heat, etc. Of course, farmers are on the front line, pastoralists, nomadic pastoralists, communities that are prone to floods and landslides, and urban populations are all vulnerable. The vulnerable sectors our agriculture and water resources, the energy sector, also the environment and ecosystems. And that leads us to a very key question that I think the previous speaker also set up very nicely, which is, what does this mean for water and food security, and food security, and what should we do about that? It's certainly the case that because agriculture is responsible for such a high proportion of water use, and this is true globally as well as, of course, in Central Asia, where that proportion of water withdrawals used for agriculture reaches 90%, that water security is essentially a food systems problem. So we need to connect these things together. And we know that as we move into a future where demand for food is growing, that demand for water will grow as well. So then if we put that in the context of the climate change future that we've just seen outlined in the previous with the previous panel, we know that the challenge of food security and water security in Central Asia as well as elsewhere, this is getting harder, and it is going to get harder. Water and food security are getting harder as we go forward in time now. So it's undeniable then that to feed the population as we look into the future will require more efficient use of water. We need to produce more food with less water. And of course, the RLC in the Central Asia region offers us a very dramatic lesson in what happens if we mismatch if we have a mismatch between water availability and the demand for water and the use of water. So we should look forward then into a future where we have as an objective for climate change adaptation, we have as an objective in this region to use less water for agriculture. That will be a robust strategy, a climatically robust strategy, because agriculture will be less vulnerable to scarcity, but it will also have the advantage of protecting ecosystems and the communities that depend on them. It can reduce energy costs associated with water supply and irrigation, and free up energy for other parts of the economy. So approaches to adaptation then that are based around the water, energy, food, and ecosystems nexus provide us a really excellent starting point for adaptation, particularly perhaps in the Central Asia region. So I wanted to share one particular example of that comes from IMI's research and research that we've done with partners on how better agricultural water management can reduce water withdrawals and so protect against scarcity, cut energy costs for water supply and irrigation, and so perhaps set up a more robust climate change, a more robust future for climate change adaptation as well as mitigation. And this is the example of lift irrigation, so very energy intensive in the region, very energy intensive pumping of water upwards, sometimes 100 meters for irrigation of different crops. This is very expensive, reduces river flows to the ROC and adds to greenhouse gas emissions. And research has shown that increasing the efficiency of irrigation water use helps us to decrease electricity demand, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, leave more water in the rivers, reduce the return flow of agriculture into the rivers, so protect downstream water quality and human health. So an example then of using the nexus to reduce vulnerability to climate change, that more robust, that viewpoint that gives us a more robust approach to the future. By using that kind of integrated systems, nexus-based approaches. Just before I wind up, I'd like to just make a remark about maladaptation. So maladaptation, the unintended consequences of climate change adaptation. And I think here, of course, in your region, the RLC again provides some lessons that need to resonate with us, the lessons around unintended consequences. And so with maladaptation, as was the case in the RLC, we have to take good care of unintended consequences around environmental degradation, around fisheries, agriculture and food, health issues, migration, and so on. So, and I think in the case of Central Asia, that maladaptation lens accentuates for us the real critical central role here of regional cooperation. So we can't risk decisions on adaptation in one country that have maladaptive impact on other countries. And so cooperation on water management for climate change adaptation and mitigation, combined with food security and energy, becomes even more crucial in the Central Asia region than it already is. And we know it's already extremely important. So just to conclude then, as we look forward to climate change adaptation, the climate change impacts and adaptation to them and mitigation, this really demands an approach based around collective action, well informed by, as we've heard from the previous panel, previous speakers, by science-based solutions that can stitch together these problems and solutions for food, water, energy, climate resilience in the region. So the important use there of data-driven assessments of the interconnections between climate, water, and agriculture, and coherence in the policies for those systems, tools for robust adaptation and mitigation that utilize nexus thinking, utilize intersectoral approaches, data to enable us to understand risks across maladaptation, and the analysis that can help us to do that, and then base that in an approach that's built on regional cooperation across water, energy, food, infrastructure, and climate. Not a simple task, but I know one that is at the core of the thinking and leadership that we see and that I'm in your region and that I'm sure we'll see the benefits of as we go forward into the years ahead. Thank you.
All right, we will have our next bigger panel now. And for this, I will introduce my dear colleague, Abror Gafurov. Yeah, we're now moving into this panel entitled, do we have it here? Yeah, maybe I'll leave it up to you to introduce the panel. But Abror is working at the German National Research Center for Geosciences, which we actually at PIC, we share a big research space on the mountain. So we're neighbors in Potsdam. And he's specializing in mountain hydrology and project coordination for the Central Asia Water Project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. This is actually a perfect timing. We finished the first panel discussion 2 minutes earlier. This is great. My name is Abror Gafurov, and I'm a scientist at the Research Center for Geosciences at Potsdam in Germany. And we are also involved in the Green Central Asia project. And I'm also coordinating the project called Tsava Green. Yeah, as Stephanie already mentioned, we do a lot of mountain hydrology and water resources studies in Central Asia. So yeah, considering the time constraints, I will continue. And we have the same rules as we had in the previous session. So 5 minutes for each speaker. And for this, I would like to call our panelists to the stage. This is Dr. Axel Paulsch. Please take your seat. We have then Mr. Rustam Nazirhan. He will come later. Okay, good. Then I would like to call Dr. Bolot Moldobekov from Central Asian Institute of Applied Geosciences. Then we have Altina Yespembetova from the German Kazakh University. So yeah, as I said, we have 5 minutes for each speaker. And as a first speaker, I would like to call Dr. Axel Paulsch. He is an German ecologist working at the interface between science and implementation policy. As chair of the Institute for Biodiversity Network, he and his team formed the science policy interface for the German funding mission Client 2 that includes climate change mitigation projects in Central Asia. Please, Dr. Paulsch, floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, also from my side, and thank you for the kind introduction. As you said, with that presentation, we go from research on climate impacts to research on response measures that can help to deal with the climate change in Central Asia. Well, that was a bit quick for the first. I didn't touch it. Could we go back to the first slide? Yeah. Well, and I wanted to introduce to you the funding program Client 2 from the Federal Ministry for Education and Research of Germany, which is part of the Research for Sustainability initiative. And it's my pleasure with our Institute for Biodiversity to form the so-called science policy interface for this funding program, which is running for 5 years now already. It started in 2018. And to show you what Client 2 is doing, it's a worldwide program with adapted research projects all around the world in different developing countries. And as you can see, Central Asia is one of the regions that is in the focus of this program. And the symbols you see on the left side of this slide show that the projects of Client 2 deal with different topics, so to say. It's climate protection and energy efficiency. It's adaptation to climate change, but it's also land management under changing conditions that come with climate change. There are projects dealing with sustainable energy systems. There are projects that deal with more and more upcoming natural hazards. And we heard from our panelists before that specifically in Central Asia, the risk of flooding, landslides will change with or will increase with glacier melting. There are projects about resource efficiency and circular economy, and finally water management. And we also heard that water is one of the most important issues in Central Asian countries. To show you a few of these projects that take place in Central Asia, I have a little list here. So first of all, I want to mention CASIP, that is a coordination office for all the projects that deal or that take place in the Central Asian countries, and it's based in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And there's permanent staff there trying to help to coordinate these projects and network between the projects and help to make them also visible on the political agenda of these countries. We heard that the change in water resources might lead to, on the one hand, flooding in the spring, but drought in the summer. So the risk for farmers to have a reliable harvest is one of the big risks that occur. And the project Klim Alets tries to deal with that by offering insurance systems and insurance products to individual farmers, so that when through a natural hazard, to too much or to low water, they lose part of their harvest, that they're not completely ruined, but that part of their income goes into insurance products to help them to sustain to the next season and hope for better results. Then there is a project that is called PV2 Heat. PV means photovoltaic. So it tries to reduce air pollution in the city of Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. I mean, it's not within these 5 countries, but the situation is the same. And they, especially in winter, with their heating with coal, they produce a lot of CO2, and it's one of the unhealthiest cities you can live in. And this project tries to install other heating systems with solar energy. And then we know, especially from Uzbekistan, that cotton is a very important agricultural product, but that needs irrigation, and that leads to salination of agricultural soils. And Kendir text tries to replace cotton by another plant called Kendir, which also produces fiber. And the fibers can be used in the textile industry. This plant is growing on saline soils, and it doesn't need that much irrigation. So it would be an alternative to what is going on in Uzbekistan at the moment, while changing to a more greener and sustainable economy here. And the red light has been blinking, so I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pausch, for these insights of Client 2 projects and contribution of the ministry in Germany for climate change impact studies and solutions. Yes, that is great input. Now I would like to ask if Mr. Rustam Nazirhan has already arrived. This is not the case. Then I would like to move further and call Dr. Bolot Moldobekov to give his inputs. Dr. Bolot Moldobekov is co-director at Central Asian Institute for Applied Geosciences in Kyrgyzstan. He holds a diploma in mining and geology from Kyrgyz Technical University. And Dr. Moldobekov is also our very good partner in different projects. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, my English not very good, but I discuss my presentation, okay? Уважаемые коллеги, позвольте мне представить короткую презентацию. На самом деле, вы знаете, что сегодня уже многие авторы, многие выступающие сказали, климат – это температура и осадка, и это изменение очевиден. И мы это видим. Вот, пожалуйста, здесь подведены итоги по регионам Кыргызстана, где меняется температура, где меняются осадки. И это очевиден. И самое главное, к этим уязвимым, в первую очередь, это деградация ледников идет, это водные ресурсы, это гидроэнергетика, и, естественно, биоразнообразие, а также здоровье людей. Для того, чтобы адаптироваться к этим условиям, нам необходимо, в первую очередь, наверное, научно обоснованный подход. То есть изучить оценку, проявить смелости, сделать оценку, насколько уязвимы эти секторы, как биоразнообразие, водные ресурсы и другие секторы к климатическим изменениям. На основе этих изменений, естественно, принять научно обоснованные подходы. И здесь, наверное, сегодня многие страны уже выполняют национальные адаптационные планы в рамках поддержки с помощью наших доноров и также проявлением интереса ПРООН Кыргызской Республики. В частности, мы в настоящее время разрабатываем национальный адаптационный план по 3 секторам. Это сектор разнообразия, биоразнообразия, сектор сельского хозяйства и ирригации, сектор ЧС и здравоохранения. Естественно, изменение климата не одинаково для всех регионов Кыргызстана, и поэтому мы выбрали наиболее уязвимые регионы. Это Баткенская область, Ошская область и Жалабатская область. Здесь показано изменение температуры по всем параметрам. Это здесь сегодня присутствуют как раз те исполнители, которые сделали оценку на самом деле в центральной Азии, как происходит. Здесь очень важно для принятия адаптационного мероприятия разработать национальный адаптационный план. Важно научно обоснованный подход. Поэтому сегодня нами в рамках проекта ПРООН разрабатывается данный национальный план и оценка, насколько территории уязвимы тем или иным изменениям в области сельского хозяйства, биоразнообразия и сельского хозяйства. Для этого нам очень важно, чтобы мы в настоящее время разработали национальный план по принятию мер по адаптационным мероприятиям. Я думаю, здесь очень важно для нас, для стран Центральной Азии, насколько мы разрабатываем как для стран, как Кыргызстан, скажем, Таджикистан, Узбекистан. Сегодня было бы очень важно еще и адаптационный план разработать для всего региона, потому что есть проблема трансграничных вододелений, есть использование водных ресурсов. Как будет исходить динамика изменения ледников, от этого будет и водный сток меняться. Поэтому, кроме национальных адаптационных планов, необходимо и нужно, я считаю, это очень важно, было бы и адаптационный план для региона. Как сегодня говорили многие наши исследователи, что нужно адаптационное мероприятие для того, чтобы мы могли страны устойчиво развивать страны Центральной Азии. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Tom Aldebekov, for this input from your side and examples in Kyrgyzstan. I would like to call again if Mr. Nasrkhan has arrived. This is not the case. Then I would like to call Altanay Pembetova. Altanay is a knowledge space coordinator at Kazakh-German University. She also managed the Central Asian Journal of Water Research and the Central Asian Journal of Sustainability and Climate Research, and holds a master's degree in human geography from the University of Indiana. Please, yours.
So first of all, I would like to say that we have launched the Center of Natural Resources and Sustainable Development has launched 2 scientific journals. The first one was launched in 2015, and it's called Central Asian Journal of Water Resources. And I would say that these 2 journals kind of a ray of light in the science of Central Asia, led by enthusiastic and committed editors as well as reviewers. And Barbara Janusz-Pawleta is our editor-in-chief. She is a locomotive of these journals. So thanks to her, I would say we have this presentation of quality science in Central Asia. As Dr. Abdullayev Iskandar once mentioned, Kazakhstan and Central Asia is not only the landlocked country, but it's also the knowledge-locked country. So now we're here to change it, to change this vision. So this journal right in front of you, this is a brief screenshots highlighting the most important aspects of a journal that was again established in 2015. As soon as IPCC report mentioned that there is a void of research in Central Asia. It's a bilingual journal. We encourage the submission of English papers in English because they're much more cited than the papers in Russian. It's open access journal and it's peer reviewed. So double-blind peer review process is involved over here, transparent in terms of management that is guaranteed by the Scholastic Managerial Platform. So the editorial board is represented by the 3 scientists from Germany, 3 scientists from Kazakhstan, 2 from Russia, 1 from Netherlands, as well as Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Finland. The age index of all executive board members is almost 60. It's actually 57. The number of issues produced a year is 2 issues a year, and the indexation of a journal is highlighted by all the signs in the top of this slide. First of all, we're proudly one of the 21 journals indexed in Directory of Open Access Journals. We also got indexed by the Minister of Education in Kazakhstan in 2 fields, in 2 subject areas of geography as well as water resources. And we have recently also indexed in the World CAT. Our approaching close by indexation is Scopus and Web of Science. I would also proudly mention that in terms of a science index, among all of the Russian scientific journals, we're ranking for 5th place, right next to those journals that are indexed in Scopus already. The next journal was established last year. It's a newborn journal. So this experience based on the one successful launch of the first one of the water journal. It's also bilingual. The editorial board is presented by the 7 scientists from Germany, 2 from Uzbekistan, 1 from Kazakhstan, as well as we have 1 board member from Austria and 1 from Czech Republic. We produce 2 issues a year, and so far we already got indexed. In spite of as I mentioned earlier, it's a newborn journal. We got indexed in EBSCO. As our indexations, they include, of course, Google Scholar and ResearchGate and Crossref. So why our journal is essential for the Central Asian science? Because Unfortunately, the local scientists, they often complain that different fields based on Central Asia are not well accepted by the recognized peer-reviewed journals indexed in Scopus and Web of Science because of the low citation, because of a low interest in Central Asia. So that's why the emergence of the regional journal has become essential. Compared to the Web of Science core collection, the age index of Central Asian papers is 40. Compare, for example, for one country of Ukraine, it's the same, while the population of Central Asia, it's almost 80 million people. In Turkey, it's 97. In other regions, well-known regions, well-researched regions, it's over 150. Well, another factor that it's quite expensive to publish peer-reviewed papers in the indexed Scopus and Web of Science index journals. And our local scientists often don't have funds in order to publish there. And that's why when you probably see Central Asian papers, you see up to 6, even 8 authors in one line contributing financially to publish there. The next factor that also our authors struggle with in order to write a quality paper, it's the absence of access to the quality of publications in the native sciences of Central Asia. You know that Russian language is losing its dominance in this region. And of course, the native languages spoken by Central Asian people, they have outdated quality and no data and no paper at all. Most papers, unfortunately, that are being considered at our journal are of descriptive character and lack hypothesis-driven approach. Even the citations are mostly made in, even if paper is written in English, the citations reference list is composed of papers written in Russian. And another factor is its high Herfindahl index of offers from the same organization for the citation rates, references with no updated sources of Web of Science and Scopus collection. And so these are the main factors. So what are the advantages of our journal? It's first of all contribution of the development of Central Asian regional scientific journals. Also the need of them for creation of them was highlighted by the peer review papers by Alisher Mirzabayev and Roman Vakulchuk, who will be the discussant in the end, right? And in DOASH, for example, we have only 28 journals. 21 of them are from Kazakhstan, and the major thematic clusters are presented by science, technology, medicine, law, and social science. So our journal also doesn't have article processing charges, including proofreading, even in English. Okay. So let me finish with the need for the reports by international organizations to be kind of transferred to the scientific papers in order to reduce this gap. It's also quite important because we read many scientific reports by the World Bank and so on. It would be good to apply this data to transfer these reports to the scientific papers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Altanay, for the information about 2 journals. Indeed, they are, as I'm also involved in one of the above-mentioned journals, these are indeed kind of a bridge to Central Asia to have an access to also publish their work in English language or also in Russian language. So I would like to call for the last time if Mr. Rustam Nazarkhan has arrived. Yes, please. I would like to give the floor to Rustam Nazarkhan. He is the head of the Department of Monitoring, Analysis and Prognosis of the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources of Kazakhstan. Please, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's more about just a free speech without a presentation. So we have recently established a Department of Modeling, Analysis and Forecasting at GSILDAMU, and a subsidiary organization of the Ministry of Ecology. which is basically emission trading system operator and also like sort of climate advisory. So we were initially supporting development of net zero strategy, and which was later transferred to Ministry of Economy and Economic Research Institute. However, we're also developers of the INDC, and we'll probably be developing a second INDC for Kazakhstan. So the models are basically an essence of INDC in general. I mean, this is basically two parts. One is the models, and the second part is technical expertise and policy analysis. In that part, not particularly at that why exactly it's in academic session, because models were basically produced and still produced by academics. So it is ongoing work. There is a already existing set of instruments which generally used, like techno-economic model and techno-economic energy system model, and also macroeconomic model. However, there is a lot of ongoing development for the sectoral models, for example, power sector models, to basically provide some support for high renewable energy share. It's also a lot of academic development, research basically development, considering how to, for example, share burden between different countries when considering like joint investment projects, so which is quite relevant to Central Asian countries. There is ongoing work with the integrated energy, water, and food nexus, like sort of kind of works. So from our side, it's actually models are just in instruments, which you need to understand that depends on human. So like this is a premise, and it all comes to the capacity development, national capacity development. If we speak about our own portfolio, we have like two main models. First one is techno-economic energy system times models, which is basically covering all energy activities. It's majority of the emissions. And second model is a computable general equilibrium, which does cover economic activities, provide energy prices, and these two models are linked together. So there are also sectoral models which are in development. So we're a small R&D, sort of R&D department for the ministry as well, where we develop our sector model, which basically to advocate coal exit and higher renewable energy share ambition. So there is still much work to be done because the commercial software is way better, so to say, and we're doing it on an open source framework in a collaboration with German and UK scientists. Second thing, another actually interesting model we're currently developing is air pollution and dispersion model, which helps with health assessment, population health assessment risk. And yeah, so, but this is all in good. But again, the problem is human capacity. It is extremely limited in Kazakhstan and likewise in Central Asia. And because if you want to procure some people who will do the work, who can understand how exactly these models operate, and actually the second part is even total, how to translate into policy outcomes, to recommendation to policymakers. This is part, unfortunately, also a problem even for developed countries, as we understand right now. So yeah, I guess it's more about discussion about the usefulness of the models. So I would say the second part we're actually working on is how to build more human capacity. So models are just a premise. Another part is the technical analysis itself, and we are like a academia to policy interface. There should be also be industry to academia interface, and we clearly see it, like, because such centers were established, like we, for example, Tassildamu, and there is also likewise Economic Research Institute. They also have sort of modeling department. Similarly, but for the industry, there is a Kazmunagas, there is a Eurasian Resource Group, and I think a few more, and all of them are trying to develop models. So in Kazmunagas, they look for offsets, as I suppose. In the Eurasian Resource Group, they dedicatedly look into power sector development. And yes, I think for the Kazmunagas, additionally, besides like decarbonization department, they also have a specifically hydrogen-based laboratory. So we see that our industry basically understands that there is a lot of things which can be capitalized on, but there is a lot of work to be done still. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nazirhan, for your great input from national perspective. it is indeed a challenge, human capacity, not only in Kazakhstan, not only in Central Asia, as you correctly mentioned, also sometimes in developing countries. But it's great to see that organizations, national organizations are also trying to build models to combat climate change impacts in Central Asia. So with this, I would like to give the floor to our discussant. Our discussant today is Dr. Roman Vakulchuk. I hope he is online. Dr. Vakulchuk, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. I will introduce you. Dr. Roman Vakulchuk is head of the research group for climate and energy and a senior researcher at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. He holds a PhD in economics from Jacobs University, Bremen. He published on energy transition, geopolitics of critical materials, climate change, and much more. Dr. Vakulchuk, you have 5 minutes. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a big pleasure to be here with you today. And I would like just to focus on 4 key takeaways that relate to what the presenters were talking about, very insightful ideas about their ongoing research. And also when it comes to gaps, opportunities in terms of knowledge production on climate change in Central Asia, which is also closely related to what we do in our research. I would like to start with the fact that I've been working on the assessing the knowledge production on climate change in Central Asia over the last 5 years. I think this relates to the IPCC report back in 2014, which identified that there are like 51 knowledge gaps when it comes to Central Asia. And Central Asia was one of the least and still remains one of the least studied regions in Asia. So I would say that comparing climate change adaptation with climate change mitigation, I should say that climate change adaptation is widely covered, and it's covered better than climate mitigation, which is lagging behind. At the same time, I should say that there are, of course, enormous gaps when it comes to social science research. And we did also very detailed study to see what are the main gaps in terms of the produced knowledge. And I should say that, for example, we looked at the nexus between climate change and eco-migration. We found that there are only 3 studies on this particular nexus. We also looked at climate change and poverty in Central Asia, climate change and security. We also found only 1 or 2 publications, which is, of course, very low compared to the magnitude of this problem. We also looked at the issue of rising temperatures and its impact on health. And what we found is that there are only 3 publications. 2 of them are reports from international organizations and only 1 academic article. And it's actually very great to see from Dr. Moldabekov that Ministry of Health of Kyrgyzstan, that's what we learned today during the presentation, is already part of the general planning with respect to the assessing long-term implications of climate change impacts. So it's great to see efforts from the policymakers in this regard. But I would say that what we really also need is that we need to encourage and also enhance the research when it comes to the health of the population across the region, across all the countries of Central Asia. Another very important gap is that there are only few publications that combine perspectives from natural scientists and social scientists. So there are only few, and one of them is our publication that we did and published last year. It takes an effort, it takes time, but I think it's very synergetic to try to produce a joint research combining these 2 perspectives. And finally, we also need more research that would focus on the nexus between different areas. So like say, publications that would focus on energy, food, water combined. My second point is that it's also fantastic to see growing knowledge production, including these 2 journals that Altenay was talking about. I should say that we also need more research from scholars who actually study Central Asia. And at the moment, we know that, international organizations like the World Bank, ADB, and many others, they're more or less the main actors that provide sources of funding for this research on this topic. But we need also, I think, more focus from the ministries of education, from the different institutions that provide research grants to Central Asia, to also try to increase the focus on this area, because this area remains greatly underfinanced. My third point is that regarding modeling of different scenarios in terms of emissions, modeling that, for example, Mr. Nasser Khan has just presented in their work, It's also very important, and this, I think, also speaks directly to the message from Alisher Mirzabayev concerning the need to produce more locally based models that would take into account local context and all those nuances. And I think that what we really also have to add in this area is to produce also more knowledge on how to integrate and model the regional integration on this topic. So how to make the solution to climate change work better, and what needs to be done in terms of the regional adaptation effort. So how to make countries cooperate greatly on issues like water, agriculture, and so on. Again, I think this might look like that, well, it's essential that countries cooperate, but again, very little research as regards what has to be done to make them work and to share resources, to share data, and so on. And finally, my fourth point is that I think we shouldn't also forget about the role that Central Asia can play for the global mitigation efforts. We know that Central Asia is greatly endowed with different types of mineral resources, so critical materials like lithium, cobalt, and so on. And we know that Central Asia can provide a substantial and quite sizable share of those minerals to the global markets, which can also make it a very important actor. And I think we should also talk about the need to pay more attention to this area, also including from different international organizations, in order to better integrate and basically make the best out of Central Asia's endowment with those resources. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vakulchuk, for your important comments to this panel discussion. Now, I would like to ask if there is any one urgent question from the audience. This seems to be not the case. If this is not the case, then I would like to thank the panelists. I may ask you to take your seats. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I will give the floor to my co-moderator, Stefani, who will then give the floor over to Barbara for closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed to the speakers as well as discussants. Everybody has been very cooperative on time, so thank you. That makes the job a lot easier. And today, I think we've seen an overview of the climate crisis and how it will unfold in the Central Asian region, as well as the cascading risk associated with it. And I think it was quite insightful what we've heard. And certainly the German Kazakh universities' efforts to fill this gap with regards to scientific publication with the Water Journal, as well as the Journal for Sustainability and Climate Change, I think are great efforts, and certainly show that there are developments in the right direction when it comes to covering Central Asia scientifically. And certainly my institution, the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and GFZ, and also Kazakh German University are also part of the Green Central Asia Initiative, which is funded by the German Federal Foreign Office. And within this initiative, we try to foster scientific exchange, knowledge sharing, capacity enhancement, and political dialogue all at once. And so I think this really shows the German government's commitment to continue working in the Central Asian region. And this event here has just been one little part of this. So I would, for some very brief remarks, would hand over to Barbara for no more than 5 minutes, but you can be as brief as you want.
It's going to be just 30 seconds, and to say really thank you so much for everybody who has joined here and online. Many of you are very busy at this COP, and but I remember just when we were applying for this session, especially the Kazakh government to take us on the because today I am representing the Kazakhstan here, which I'm proud of, being originally from Poland. I really would not believe that it will happen, and that kind of sessions on science and climate in Central Asia, it's quite it was difficult. It was difficult to find scientists coming here because we would not be able to afford to bring them here. But there, some of them we could have done it because, again, of the GIZ support of many others. Thank you so much for coming. And I think that the journey is just starting and you are on board already. So don't forget us. We will come back to you one day and hope you come back to us also one day. Thank you so much for your presence today.
Yeah.